Llegó la hora. Llegó la hora. Radiofamiliar TV 2020. La Grande. Te trae el programa número uno en las redes sociales. Las entrevistas del momento. Los temas más calientes. Lo que a ti te interesa conocer. Las personalidades que hacen historia en nuestro país. Eso y mucho más en Radiofamiliar TV 2020. La Grande. Prepárate y ponte cómodo para disfrutar lo mejor en las redes sociales. Radiofamiliar TV 2020. La Grande.
Damas y caballeros, y ahora con ustedes su moderador, Agustín Lombard.
They test me yesterday. They asked me whether or not I want the check to be paid, and I say
Donald Trump knows how this ultimately ends, how he closes this.
Yes, it did. That is absolutely They talk 100%. That's a very shady safety. Very shady. Dime, no puede entrar ahora. Después.
This is an ABC News Live special.
3 days after the election, we still don't know who will be the next president of the United States.
There are now only a few states yet to be decided in the presidential race.
It is the will of the voters. No one, not anything else, that chooses the president of the United States of America.
From ABC News Election Headquarters, Election 2020.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for streaming with us. And we want to get right to this breaking news that we just received. Joe Biden is now ahead in the state of Pennsylvania. The state now has 95% of expected votes reported. And this is a big one with 20 electoral votes up for grabs. Joe Biden now slightly ahead there in the state of Pennsylvania. So let's take a look at where things stand overall for the candidates. Joe Biden has 253 electoral votes. President Trump has 214 electoral votes. Again, why Pennsylvania is such a big one with 20 electoral votes up for grabs. It could put Joe Biden over that 270 mark. But again, this race is still up for grabs for either candidate because we're still waiting on results from 6 states. 5 of those are battlegrounds: Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. So here's a look at some of those votes being counted right now. This is at a counting center in Philadelphia. Those vote counters doing their best to try to get us results to this presidential election now 3 days after the election. Let's get right to Trevor Alt in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Trevor, this is not by any means over, but it is big news for Joe Biden.
Well, absolutely, and it was news that we have sort of been waiting on, Diane. This was an update from those Philadelphia ballot counters that you just showed, and it was the result of them working through the night to get these ballots counted. It was the first time the Philadelphia area has updated in about 8 hours, and it was the biggest swing that we have seen in this race in well over a 24-hour period. Joe Biden went from being down more than 18,000 votes to now being up about 5,500, and saying that, you mentioned this is with 95% reporting, there are still 135,000 votes left to be counted and reported here in Pennsylvania. The overwhelming majority of them are mail-in ballots where Joe Biden has a significant advantage. So not only has he taken the lead, he is likely to expand it and give himself some cushion to the point where he very well could win Pennsylvania by a much wider margin than he won a state like Wisconsin so far, which was a 20,000 vote victory. And each update we've been seeing since basically election night, when President Trump had a lead north of 600,000 votes, has been swinging in former Vice President Joe Biden's favor. Now, of course, you have been hearing these widespread allegations of voter fraud or counting illegal votes here in Pennsylvania and in other states from President Trump and from his supporters, too. I want to clarify, Diane, the main source of what these supporters consider to be illegal votes here in Pennsylvania is the fact that Democrats in the state want to count mail-in ballots that arrive after Election Day. Now, there is a lawsuit right now that is pending on whether or not those votes should be counted or not. So because of that pending lawsuit, from the beginning of the counting, any mail-in ballot that was received after Election Day has been sequestered and put off to the side. And they might end up not counting, but they're not in the total right now. And so if you think that all of those votes shouldn't count and they're illegal, you may very well be right. But none of Joe Biden's lead has to do with those votes, and he very well could not need them in the end. So right now, the positioning is incredibly strong for Joe Biden because, as you have said, everyone in America knows there are so many states that could be considered toss-ups or at least very close right now. If Joe Biden wins here, and he's in great shape to do so right now, the election is his regardless of what happens anywhere else. Diane.
All right, big moment. Trevor Alt in Harrisburg. Thanks, Trevor. To Georgia now, where Joe Biden took the lead overnight. Elwin Lopez is in Jonesboro, Georgia. And Elwin, this also seems to be a big one because of the surprise factor here. Not only has Georgia been a Republican stronghold for decades, but as of yesterday, even Biden's own camp wasn't super confident about his prospects there.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they called it even a toss-up. But you know, Biden is ahead about 1,096 votes at this point. What has led the former vice president ahead of President Trump is the votes that were counted here in Clayton County. Now, to give you some perspective on this county, this is a blue-leaning county. It is also a county that was long represented in Congress by the late civil rights icon John Lewis. Now, John Lewis tweeting in 2016, quote, "The right to vote is almost sacred," calling it a powerful nonviolent tool in a democratic society. Now, the Secretary of State's office telling us this morning that there are at least 8,197 votes still outstanding, and that counties are, quote, treating everybody fairly. The Georgia voting systems manager said this morning that they have been receiving reports of a few irregularities, but that they have dispatched an investigator to look into those, and that those types of reports happen during every election. Take a listen.
We've had reports of specific things. We send investigators out to look for specific evidence and the reality behind those. We always get those in every election. It's a normal thing. We have not seen anything so widespread that it could potentially affect the outcomes. But as you know, when you have a race that's this close, even the smallest thing can affect those outcomes. So we're going to be diligent. The counties are being diligent. They are working hard. They are all exhausted. But we feel like they're doing a good job and they're treating everybody fairly.
Now, not only do those outstanding absentee ballots need to be counted, but we also need to be counting those provisional ballots that still are yet to come in, and also overseas and military ballots and any ballots that need to be cured by the end of today. Diane. All right, Elwin Lopez for us in Jonesboro, Georgia. Elwin, thank you. And now let's go to Arizona, where Vice President Biden is currently ahead. Our Zoreen Shah is in Phoenix. Zoreen, good morning. Where do things stand in Arizona? We haven't heard a ton from the state lately.
Hi, good morning, Diana. We will in just about less than 2 hours here, but this is where it stands right now. Trump and Biden are separated by just 2 percentage points. This is good news for Trump. It's a smaller margin than it was yesterday. Biden now has just over 50% of the vote. Trump has just over 48% of the vote. There's about 47,000 votes that separates the two. Biden is in the lead, but even Nate Silver saying that this still is not enough for Biden to be in a safe area. There's still about 300,000 votes that have left to be counted. Biden, of course, is still in that better position, and that is making a lot of people out here nervous, a lot of Trump supporters nervous. We saw about 100 of them outside of the area where the votes were being counted yesterday. They were chanting, "Count the vote." Some of them told us that they wanted to make sure all the legal votes were being counted. Of course, there is no indication that any other types of votes are being counted right now. They also said that if Arizona goes blue, it is going to be because of corruption. Of course, there's no evidence to back that up. Now, the next batch of votes comes out at 9 a.m. our time here in Arizona. Diane?
Yep, Arizona right now, 50% to 49%. Zoreen Shah in Phoenix, thank you. And votes are still being counted in Nevada as well. The race there, very tight. Our Matt Gutman is in Las Vegas right now. Good morning, Matt. You know, we didn't hear much from Nevada overnight. What do we know now?
Not much more than we did yesterday at this point, actually. A number of votes were counted yesterday, but they were really trickling in from rural counties, a couple from Washoe County. It extended Joe Biden's lead to a paltry 11,000 votes. This is not, Diane, where the Biden camp thought it would be 3 mornings after the election. 11,000 votes is really a blip. It's less than 1%. Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama handily won this state, so it's a little bit closer than they hoped it would be. In the meantime, the Trump camp has filed a criminal referral to Attorney General Bill Barr, alleging thousands of instances of voter fraud across the state. We have asked for any evidence. Show us the video. Prove it. Anything. They have given us zero. The Trump campaign has been extremely litigious, even leading up to the elections, filing multiple lawsuits about fraud, illegalities, things they didn't like. All of them have been shot down by the state Supreme Court here. The registrar here, as we've seen in Pennsylvania and Georgia and in Arizona, we just spoke with Zoreen, there have been no obvious evidence of voter fraud.
Dime, Jorge, buenos días. Aquí estoy. Aquí estoy. No sé si tú estás en el aire ahora o no, con la fabulosa.
Yo estoy en el aire, sí.
Está bien, bueno, yo estoy en el aire con Radiofamiliar TV2020 haciendo el conteo de lo que está pasando en este momento.
Ok, papá.
Bueno.
Está bien.
Buen
Está
día.
bien. Si quieres te llamo un momentico y nos conectamos los dos como tú quieras, no sé.
Muy bien, muy bien. Adelante.
Illegalities or any ballots that should be looked at more than once in terms of are hopeful with 190,000 ballots still left to be counted that he could extend his lead, hopefully to around 1.5% to 2%, Diane.
And Matt, we see the Vegas sign behind you. That is a city for gambling and betting. So out of curiosity, what are the bookies saying there? What are the odds in this race right now?
So you know that betting on elections in the United States is illegal, but it is legal abroad, and they're doing it with some intensity, apparently. European bookies are talking about $5 million bets, £1 million bets. So leading into the elections, Joe Biden was favored by a factor of 3. Then election night happened, Tuesday night. Everything started to sway towards the Trump side, and it sort of mirrored our national whiplash. The bookies bookies changed the bets then. Trump was 3 times more likely to win. As it stands this morning, we just checked about an hour ago, Joe Biden has a 25 times more chance or a higher likelihood of winning than President Trump. In betting terms, that would be minus 2,500. So there you have it. Not a good bet to make this point if you want to make any money, Diane.
I don't intend to, Matt, but we like to round it all out with the information. Thanks.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, former Vice President Joe Biden says he has no doubt that when all the votes are counted, he will be the next president of the United States. ABC's Rachel Scott is in Wilmington, Delaware, where the Biden campaign headquarters is located. And Rachel, with Biden taking the lead in Pennsylvania, that confidence, I'm sure, only grows. But you were saying his campaign was expecting this.
They feel like they are getting closer and closer to the White House with every passing hour, with every single vote that is being counted. They're looking at these encouraging signs out of Pennsylvania, where he is now taking the lead, out of Georgia, a state that has not voted for a Democratic president since 1992. That's nearly 30 years. They say they are absolutely confident that Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States. And it's not a matter of if, but when, and figuring out which states are going to push him over the edge. And they're also serving as a sharp contrast to President Trump. Joe Biden saying that every single vote should be counted. He's urging Americans to pack a little bit of a patience here, to keep calm and let the democratic process play out the way it's supposed to. But he's also trying to assure Americans that he's stepping into a leadership role. We saw him yesterday come in front of the cameras, and before he even touched on the election, he touched on COVID-19. That would be one of the very big challenges that Joe Biden would be inheriting should he be the next president of the United States. They have a transition website out, and I have been spending a lot of time here in this parking lot, Diane. This is where Joe Biden would make his victory speech. We are already seeing them tinker with the monitors, start preparing, testing things out for if he should win, Diane.
All right, Rachel Scott in Wilmington, Delaware, at Biden headquarters. Thanks, Rachel. Meanwhile, President Trump has been very active on Twitter overnight. Kira Phillips is keeping an eye on the Trump campaign. And Kira, anything from the campaign since we got this news from Pennsylvania?
Not yet, but standing by. I'm sure we'll see a tweet sometime soon. The Trump has been attacking this election from the very start, and in the briefing last night and with his tweets this morning, no different. This is the last one we've been able to see thus far. I easily win the presidency of the United States with legal votes cast. The observers were not allowed in any way, shape, or form or to do their job, and therefore votes accepted during this period must be determined to be illegal votes. The U.S. Supreme Court should decide. Of course, he was talking about Pennsylvania, the lawsuit filed there trying to get access into the ballot counting, but that went nowhere, basically. And instead of offering inspiration, calm, and trust in our sacred right to vote and be counted, he just continues to exude distrust within our election process and dissing our democracy. I mean, last night he described the election, and I quote here, a case where they are trying to steal an election. They are trying to rig the election. We can't let that happen. At what point does someone actually come into the president's ear and say enough is enough? As we've been following the GOP response to Trump's defiance and the speech last night, only 2 supporters so far taking to the airwaves. No surprise, really. Senators Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, and Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina, supported a number of President Trump's unsubstantiated claims of widespread voter fraud and election corruption. But there has also been some pushback as of this morning. We saw this tweet from Senator Mitt Romney tweeting, counting every vote is at the heart of democracy. The process is often long, and for those running frustrated, the votes will be counted. If there are any irregularities alleged, they will be investigated and ultimately resolved in the courts. Have faith in our democracy, in our Constitution, and in the American people. Today, Trump's legal team, Diane, still on this cross-country whack-a-mole tour, filing these lawsuits and claiming election fraud in states where he doesn't like the numbers. And at the same time, lawsuits are also getting tossed out, like in Georgia and Michigan. Those are gone. The evidence behind Trump's claims just not there. So cue the song Desperado. as we just reported, the breaking news that Biden now takes the lead in the crucial state of Pennsylvania. It appears the Trump campaign is all about litigation now to fight these leads that Biden is gaining and on the hunt for evidence that would prove these claims of election fraud. Still, just nothing to be proven yet. We're following it.
All right, Kira Phillips in Washington for us. Thanks, Kira. Let's bring in ABC News Deputy Political Director Mary Alice Parks now for more. Mary Alice, how big is this switch in Pennsylvania for each candidate's path to victory at this point?
Well, look, President Trump needed Pennsylvania if he was going to have any path to win. So this is a pretty big blow to the president. Joe Biden's team feels really confident as they continue to see the margins coming in. I think it's important to talk about just how much of the mail-in vote that he's been winning. In some places, upwards of 70%. It's part of the reason that they continue to think that it will trend that way. And a lot of experts on the ground aren't pushing back on that. It's not surprising that Joe Biden is winning so much of the mail-in vote. His team and Democrats across the country, as we've been saying all week, were the ones that were pushing mail-in voting. They were saying if you're nervous about the pandemic, it's okay to vote by mail. The president's team wasn't doing that. They were very much doing the opposite. So I think we just need to remind everyone this isn't surprising here. It's not surprising that those votes coming in that were frankly cast before Election Day, but are being tallied now are so Democratic leaning.
Right. And I think that's an important point to stress. These votes that are coming in right now, that are being counted right now, are all votes that were cast before the election or by Election Day.
Right. For the most part, that's exactly what we're hearing from Pennsylvania. There was this interesting part of the debate in the Pennsylvania State House where some Democrats argued that ballots should be able to be put in the mail on Election Day, and they should be counted if they arrived 3 days after Election Day. But that issue got all tangled up in the courts. And because of a lot of litigation, a lot of the counties just said, you know what, if we find a ballot like that didn't even arrive until after Election Day, we're going to set it aside for now. So in the majority of the counties, they're not even talking about those other ballots yet. They're still just making their way through the very routine process of checking all the ballots that had arrived by Election Day.
And Mary Alice, President Trump has repeatedly cast doubt on the integrity of the election. Does his speech last night change anything?
Not from a legal standpoint. You can't just declare yourself the winner. That doesn't have legal standing. And that's why I think it's been so interesting to listen to the local officials that actually run our elections. We don't run a national election in this country. We don't elect our presidents based on the popular vote. We run an electoral college system with very local elections done on the city, municipality, and county level, even before the state level. And I have just been so impressed over the last week with the conversations with these local officials, Democrats and plenty of Republicans, who are saying, hold on, we're just doing our job. They've been very calm, very cool under all this pressure, and they had a plan here. They've been methodically working with their poll workers to just count the votes, and that's where we're going to keep going as reporters for information. The president doesn't get to decide here. The election officials on the ground who actually run elections decide.
Yeah, the candidates can say they are as confident as they want, but ultimately it will be those numbers that decide. But Mary Alice, there's been a handful of Republican lawmakers that have defended the president's comments, a few detractors as well that are criticizing him, but then the vast majority have been silent. What does the response, or in some cases lack of response, tell you?
I think that that we're going to have to wait and see what more of the Republican senators do. I think that we saw finally last night some Republican senators kind of come to the president's defense. They started echoing his calls to look more closely at this election. It was surprising to me because we haven't seen any evidence yet. And so if they have evidence that there's an issue, I think that they need to start presenting it. If local local officials on the ground have any evidence, they need to start talking about it, because otherwise what we're talking about here is really dangerous and scary, to tell voters that their votes wouldn't count, or tell voters that you have suspicions about their vote, but not explain why. And I think that, someone like Mitch McConnell at some point is going to have to decide. Sure, it's always nice when your team wins, but if your team's not winning and the game is fair, what's more important, a fair game or just winning, and at what cost? And Mitch McConnell is going to have to speak to this really soon.
All right. Our Deputy Political Director, Mary Alice Parks. Thanks, Mary Alice. When we come back, we're going to hear from our panel on where things stand and what happens next in the race for the White House. Stay with us.
Election 2020 on ABC News Live continues in a moment.
Welcome back. This is a live look at the convention center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where votes are still being counted. The whole country watching this state particularly very closely this morning after Joe Biden just took the lead in the vote count in Pennsylvania, a state which could put him over the top if he now holds on to that lead. So let's turn to our virtual roundtable to help break this all down. Brennan Center for Justice President Michael Waldman, Washington Post national correspondent Mary Jordan, and Lincoln Project Senior Advisor Tara Setmeyer. Thank you all for being here. Tara, I want to start with you on this news out of Pennsylvania. What does this do for the dynamic of the parties right now as they're keeping track of this count and trying to figure out their path to victory?
Well, it certainly shows an air of inevitability for Joe Biden. And this is something that the Biden campaign has been anticipating for days, as they were confident that the percentage of mail-in ballots were incredibly in his favor, more so in his favor. So that's why you've seen the Trump folks targeting Philadelphia, targeting Pennsylvania with these legal hysterics and frivolous lawsuits, trying to sow some type of discord and question the integrity of the vote, because they too internally saw that those numbers were starting to dwindle for Donald Trump. And it's simply because Pennsylvania is literally counting the votes. They decided, based on their state law, that they cannot open mail-in ballots until the day after Election Day. And that's what they did. So what Donald Trump has been doing and what the Trump camp is doing, muddying these waters is really incredibly irresponsible. So what they continue to do, what their posture looks like moving forward, I guess depends on how large Joe Biden's lead ends up after all the votes are counted.
Michael, you're an election security expert. What do you make of these allegations of widespread voter fraud from the president?
Well, they're made up. There's no evidence, and none was presented. You would think if there was any evidence at all, it would have been mentioned. It's really a rather remarkable display of disrespect for the voters, for democracy, to do that. What we see is election officials from both parties very diligently doing their job and counting the vote. And as has been said, it's really important to remember, Pennsylvania is not switching to Biden. These were the earliest votes cast in many instances. They're just being counted now. And when all the votes are counted, it does look as though it's highly likely that today Joe Biden will be president-elect. And I think...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that there's a lot less doubt than some people are trying to manufacture for partisan and personal reasons.
I just wanted to reiterate that, as we heard earlier in the show, we heard from an election official on Good Morning America this morning out of Georgia saying that, they are looking into any allegations that they do hear of any kind of fraud, but that during any normal election, they do get little allegations here and there. And it's not that they are ignoring this. They, too, in addition to whatever ends up going through the courts, are investigating these. And so far, they haven't found anything concerning. But just to play devil's advocate here, Michael, can you just walk us through what would have to happen for the president's allegations to be true and why it's so unlikely?
Well, there's a lot of security around elections, and it would be possible, I suppose, for people. It's actually quite hard for him to do the fan fiction of imagining it, because there's just such an infinitesimal amount of this kind of misconduct of people voting in someone else's name. In absentee ballots, for example, there are barcodes. There's quite a bit of security. It's kind of a widespread urban myth. We want to make sure that elections are secure and safe. But this year, there's paper ballots. Everybody's voting on paper ballots. There can be recounts if there need to be. Folks should have a lot of confidence in their vote being counted.
Mary, you have a lot of experience covering Trump. If Biden does end up winning, is there any chance the president accepts those results, or is this heading to the Supreme Court?
I think if you know Donald Trump, he likes to inflict the same kind of pain that he says he got. His phrase is, if you hit me, I'll hit you 10 times harder. He absolutely hated that the legitimacy of his win in 2016 was called into question, not just because Hillary Clinton had won almost 3 million more votes, but because U.S. intelligence said that Russia had interfered in that election to help Trump. He hated that. I mean, he talked about it all the time. And now these allegations, though there's no basis, are very effective, because what he's trying to do and what he is doing, and I'm talking to voters, is trying to delegitimize what is clearly on path to be a Biden win. He's trying to weaken him as he goes into the office. And they're already talking, you can see Trump's kids already talking about 2024. And as we know, Donald Trump could come back and run again in 2024, or he could certainly put his weight. I mean, think of the votes Trump got. I mean, we can't disallow how effective he was. He is a powerhouse, and they're already talking, the inner circle of Trump, about 2024.
Interesting. Tara Setmeyer, Mary Jordan, Michael Waldman, thank you all. And as the nation waits for the results of our presidential election, the rest of the world is also watching. ABC's Ian Pannell joins us from London with more on that. Ian, what's the international reaction so far?
Yeah, I mean, we're watching, we're waiting, we're all glued to our TV screens, and we're all looking at the front pages of the newspapers, not just here in Britain, but across Europe, Asia, all the continents. They're all leading with just one story. And most of them this morning are reacting to President Trump's extraordinary speech in the White House last night. I want to show you a couple of the newspapers here in Britain. This is the Independent newspaper, President in Meltdown. Another one of the more colourful tabloids, Grumpy Trumpy, set to lose bigly, and it refers to one of the president's tweets there. But there's also been some more serious reaction. The German foreign minister has just been giving an interview. He's also tweeted, this is one of the first official reactions from any European leader, saying what is happening in America doesn't quite correspond to the democratic culture we know from the USA. What's important is that the result is then accepted by everyone. It's easy to be a winner, but sometimes it's really hard to be a loser. And I think people are looking forward to what kind of policy differences, tangible policy differences, whether it's President Trump or President Biden, what difference it will make. Firstly, let's look at the Paris Climate Accords. This is about reducing emissions. This week, the United States officially withdrew from that agreement, which means emissions will rise in the United States. Joe Biden says he'll re-enter those negotiations, which means emissions will fall. Something very, very tangible. But there are other things as well. There's the Iran nuclear deal. There's relations with China, with Russia, with North Korea, with Kim Jong-un. Remember, President Trump put a lot of time, a lot of effort into that relationship. It hasn't really borne fruit. However, what will President Biden do in South Korea? They're also watching this closely. The result matters to all of us in every single US election. But it feels that this one matters much, much more. For now, most world leaders are keeping their powder dry. They're waiting to see who the next leader of the United States is, with one exception. This is the Slovenian prime minister. Remember, Melania Trump comes from Slovenia. The prime minister there already congratulating President Trump on his next term in office. And most of us are watching, waiting, glued to Twitter, glued to the television, and reading the front pages of the papers. Diane?
All right, Ian Panel for us in London. Thanks, Ian. And that does it for this ABC News Live election update. I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back live at 11 a.m. Eastern with your latest news, context, and analysis.
It's Friday, November 6th, and Joe Biden is building a wall of his own. We start here. It's not inevitable, but it's getting close.
Both campaigns are kind of doing some mathematical jujitsu.
In several states now, the president's up by a little with a lot of ballots left to be counted.
What many people are suspecting is that there are now enough votes out there for Joe Biden to take the lead.
There are 3 states to keep your eye on this morning. We've got a reporter in each of them. Meanwhile,
if you count the legal votes, I easily win.
President Trump has started openly telling supporters about vague conspiracy theories with no evidence.
Donald Trump may concede that the election was stolen from him.
GOP lawmakers have supported him for 4 years. What will they do now with an election on the line? From ABC News, this is Start Here. I'm Brad Milkey. As we get further from Election Day, it's worth reminding ourselves that as much as this feels like we're watching a game where the score is changing in real time, that game has already happened. We're watching it on DVR. People voted on Tuesday, and they voted well beforehand. What we're learning now, hour by hour, is what that score ended up being. But say you were watching that game that had already taken place. The team you want to win is in the lead, and someone says, hey, pause the game. Don't watch any further. Would you think that was good news? Would you think your team was about to win or lose?
We are expecting to hear from the president momentarily. His lead shrinking in the all-important state of Pennsylvania. He needs that state to win re-election.
Well, as you look around the country this morning and you see the numbers changing, President Trump could still win this thing.
This graphic right here was the toughest thing they've had to do so far because we put this together just a few minutes ago and the numbers are changing so fast.
The numbers are going to keep changing through the night. There's no question about that. Nate,
but every time a new batch of ballots is counted, it is looking grimmer for him. Now, there have been no new projections from ABC News. That's for our decision desk to do, and they're a lot smarter than I am. But if the current trend lines continue, it is becoming less a question of who will get to 270 electoral votes than which state will put Joe Biden over the top. So let's hear about this now from the people who've been observing polling places, tracking vote totals, hounding secretaries of state for updates since Election Day. We begin our day with a team of reporters supporters fanned out across the country. Steve Osunsami, our correspondent based in Georgia. Eva Pilgrim, who worked the local beat in Philly. She is now back in Pennsylvania. And ABC's Whit Johnson in Arizona. Steve, let's start with you, because if there's any state where it's almost surely going to be on a razor's edge now, it turns out to be Georgia.
Yes. And, I'm a little speechless because I have lived here for more than 20 years. And I have never seen a presidential election in Georgia in that time go like this. And just to underline it, this race is super, super tight. The definite difference here is the mail vote, the absentee votes. So many of those votes that came in the mail, those votes are breaking heavily for Joe Biden. It really is amazing. I was looking at some of the votes in DeKalb County. The absentee votes were breaking 8-2 for Joe Biden.
Elections matter. Completing this general election is a huge hurdle crossed, but it's far from the end of our work.
And so the Secretary of State, who I will underline is a Republican and a Trump supporter, who also received the president's endorsement when he ran for Secretary of State, says that there are at least 10 to 20,000 more votes out there, which, you can do the math, 10 to 20,000 more votes. You don't need a large percentage of that to overtake this total.
Yeah, I'm focused on Clayton County, Georgia, the bluest county in the state.
And what votes, many people are suspecting is that there are now enough votes out there for Joe Biden to take the lead. There are enough votes for that to happen. It's no longer just a wish or a dream. It is now a possibility, and a very good one.
Eva, let's talk about Pennsylvania, because that's a state at this point where these mail ballots have made it where Joe Biden might not just win, he might win comfortably. What has happened with these mail ballots?
Biden has been taking about 77% of those mail-in ballots in his favor. The people on the street, I'm in Philadelphia, which is a Democratic stronghold, but they all seem pretty optimistic that Biden is going to catch Trump.
Places many people are going to remember from the first debate when the president said bad things happen in Philadelphia. And it's really ended up being kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy for the president, because bad things are happening to him with regard to the vote tally at this point in Philadelphia County. Vice President Biden is up by 80%. And this is really.
And when you look at the simple math of it all, that seems to be pointing in that direction, and everyone is sort of kind of prepared for that to happen. It's just a matter of when the votes are actually counted. You have to count the votes to get there.
And Whit Johnson, any comeback for President Trump would clearly involve him making a comeback in Arizona, like right now.
Absolutely. And you know what? We have seen this slow rolling comeback from Donald Trump. Is it going to be enough? We just don't know yet.
The race in Arizona is getting closer and closer every day, just like we told you it would yesterday, just like we're telling you right now.
And both campaigns are kind of doing some mathematical jujitsu to see if there is a path forward, if he can in fact do it. But at the same time, this is a real example of the reason and need to count every single ballot. And I can tell you that some of the messaging coming from President Trump and the White House has left some here in Arizona scratching their heads, including those in the Republican Party.
We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list.
Count our votes, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Because on the one hand, President Trump tweeted, "Stop the count." On the other, you have people here in Arizona literally trying to make sure every single ballot is counted. And all of those ballots are keeping him alive in this race right now.
Well, yeah. And let's talk about how President Trump and his supporters have handled this. We've seen people outside these vote centers claiming that these votes somehow aren't valid, but what specific issues are they pointing to?
We haven't had broad sweeping controversies here in Arizona, but we have had a few isolated things that have really triggered some outrage here in Maricopa County.
We're not here for conspiracy. We're here for a fair and honest election. We're here.
There is this incident revolving around Sharpies being used to mark ballots.
I talked with 5 different supporters.
Some of them think the use of Sharpies on ballots may have skewed the count here in Arizona.
There is actually a lawsuit that has been filed. There's been a court hearing already about it because some people made the claim that they were told to mark their ballots with Sharpies, and then they worried that their ballots were going to be thrown in the trash. So we saw some protests outside the county recorder's office, mostly Trump supporters, dozens of them. Some of them were actually armed.
President Trump won by a landslide. He's not being given what he's worked for, what we've all voted for.
And they were trying to get inside the recorder's office to take a look at the ballot counting. Now, the county and the Secretary of State has been trying to reassure everybody that even if a Sharpie is used on the ballot, it still works.
The new machines are actually made to accept the ballots with Sharpie ink on them.
That said, I think there's just a general sense of anxiety on all sides. The Secretary of State is pleading with people to just be patient. In fact, they set up fences around the county recorder's office and blocked it off and called it a free speech zone to try to encourage people to protest peacefully in a safe area.
Yeah, that's the thing, Eva. Like, the reason that this is taking longer in places like Pennsylvania is that state legislature, the Republican legislature, decided not to allow mail ballots to get counted early, like they are in Florida. But you've been able to see this counting process now up close with your own eyes. It is literally the same as these other states were doing.
We can all see the process if you want. The Philadelphia County is actually live streaming, as well as a couple of other counties. But they walked me through the process. So they take the ballot out of the envelope. There's two envelopes, right? Because there's a secrecy envelopes. We all remember the whole naked ballot issue here in Pennsylvania. So you have two envelopes that you have to remove. They have to check the envelopes, make sure that everything's kosher there. Then they take all of the ballots, they've stacked them up in these groups, they move them over to a second station, and then they flatten them all out so that you can scan them later, right? Once they get them all flattened, a big group of them, then they take them over to the scanning station. And they one by one put them on the scanner and scan them in. That is a lot of manual labor. And when you think about that process, it takes time.
Hey, Steve, if this stays close in Georgia, I mean, say even that Joe Biden takes the lead, but it's like 500 votes, 1,000 votes. Do you know what happens next?
Yes. And again, the Secretary of State is already prepared for this. There will be a recount.
But any race that's within 0.5%, state rep, state senator, congressman, or the presidential race, the candidate could ask for that within 0.5%.
So we expect whoever loses will ask for a recount. But the Secretary of State, again, a Republican, says that recounts in Georgia really don't change the totals much because of the way we do elections here. But they're prepared for a recount. They have the machines that they'll need. They say it'll take about a week, but he actually doesn't expect the vote total to change.
People feel confident about the results. They may not like the results if they're rooting for one person versus the other, but they can have that confidence. And then we're going to follow that up with our first statewide audit. So the elections will be audited.
So what he is sort of telegraphing is that the vote total that he ends up with is probably going to be what the real deal is.
Right. And so at this moment, then, the thing you should walk away with here is if Joe Biden manages to flip Arizona, Pennsylvania,
What you're about to see are some of the world's most racist commercials. Get ready, cause this is very insane. I guess we're colorblind. This is an ad for a mobile game that was posted just 2 weeks ago.
Congratulations, my lord. Finally, you have a daughter. Really? Why she's black?
He has a black daughter, but don't you worry, because there is a solution.
Congratulations, my lord. This is incredible. Your daughter turns to white skin.
What did we just watch? And even worse, this ad was posted this month in May, and it is still online selling a mobile game. This company makes money from an insanely racist ad. And worst of all, ladies and gentlemen, with this crazy, insane ad, we are only warming up. Next on the list, Heineken's ad. The bartender is sliding the beer down the bar. It goes past one black woman, another black musician, another black woman, and finally, the beer stops with a caption, "Sometimes lighter is better." Suggestive, to say the least. This commercial came from America, and we all know what is happening there right now. But racism is not American by any means. It is global. Just look at the next commercial. Many people in Asia are so openly stigmatized for their darker skin color that it's in the commercials. Dark-skinned guy goes for a hug. She is not interested because he must be a cleaner. Another dark-skinned guy, he must be a servant. What about this one? Nope. But who is this? Look at him, he is just glowing. And he is so beautiful because he's using a cream that whitens his skin. Just 5 steps and you become worthy of the attention. In case you didn't get it, I am sarcastic. I show you these commercials because right now, at last, the world is motivated to speak up against racism. Right now is the time for us to come together and boycott racist messaging. I guess we're colorblind. Now, next on the list, let's talk about freedom, shall we? This ad comes from Israel and it's clearly anti-Muslim. The less clothes you have, the better. This is the testimony to freedom, isn't it?
Freedom is basic.
This is simply sad. Some people will say that I am too sensitive, and honestly, I get it, because I used to say the same to people. They will say that the world is becoming too politically correct. They will say that this is just a joke. It is easy for us to say, it's not racist, you are too sensitive, but do we truly know how it feels to be on the other side? Do we know how it feels to look at your own skin and think of whitening it? Do we know how it feels to be stigmatized for your own religious beliefs? Do we know how it feels to be scared of the police? We don't, and we won't, but we still can do something about it. Right now, it's in our hands to kill racism, and we can only kill it if we speak up against it. Let everyone see these horrible racist commercials. May they be the message of truth that racism is still alive, but we will work together to kill it. I guess we're colorblind. I guess we're colorblind. I guess we're colorblind.
Always great to be back in New York. It's the food, Melania. In fact, I want to stop at my favorite soup place before we go back to D.C.
You come to New York, you want soup?
Have I ever steered you wrong? Don't answer that. Listen, this guy's soup is the greatest soup in the history of soup. I'm like a soup expert.
You can have can of soup at the White House. Airport, be best.
Canned soup is for losers. This guy's soup is for winners. It's big league soup.
Donald, there's no time. Airport.
Soup, soup, soup,
oh,
soup,
boy,
soup,
anything
soup,
to
soup.
stop the Trumpy tantrum.
Hello, everybody. Wow, look at this turnout. There must be 3,000 people. This is incredible.
Help me, help me. I am being held against my will.
No bread?
You want bread? Mm-hmm. You're banned. Come back 1 year. Out.
There he is. There's my buddy. I call him Soupy. What a great nickname. He loves me. Listen, I'm going to order soup just like a normal person. Watch this. He's going to love it. That's a lot of soup. That's a lot of soup. It looks delicious. I'm going to have to make a presidential decision.
They are delicious. You know what?
What's that?
No soup for you. No mask. No mask, no soup. Be like beautiful first lady and wear a mask. Or no soup for you.
Be best, be beautiful, be me. What a mask.
I've always said there's a time and a place for a mask. And for his soup, this is the time and this is the place.
Very good, darling. Put on your face, very breathable.
Oh, wow. I look really good in a mask.
And now for wearing a mask. You get any soup you like, Mr. President, on me.
I'll take one of each. No one makes deals like me. I get a cool mask and I get free soup. Huge.
Mr. President.
Oh, sure. Come on over, buddy. I've never taken a bad selfie. All right. Beautiful. Oh, I look incredible. Wow. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Where's Melania? She's got the soup and she's social distancing without me. No soup for you. I always wanted to say that.
Hi, everyone. Larry Thomas here. You may remember me as the soup Nazi from Seinfeld. Back then, you see, we didn't need to wear a mask, and now we do.
I'm a fan of wearing a mask, and I hope you are too.
No mask, no soup. That's why I've teamed up with Boomer Naturals.
We shot this really funny video with 2 different endings. Go to boomernaturals.com/soup. Watch both and vote for your favorite video.
Or no soup for you.
Osama Bin Laden, el hombre que ordenó el ataque contra Estados Unidos. El 11 de septiembre, el trauma de Nueva York. Durante 10 años, Estados Unidos busca a su enemigo público número 1. Y lo encuentra donde nadie podía imaginar. Bin Laden muere en Abbottabad, Pakistán, el 2 de mayo de 2011. Durante la operación, numerosos documentos privados caen en manos de los estadounidenses. Algunos se publican más tarde en Internet y nos permiten asomarnos a la vida de Osama Bin Laden. Cómo se sentía, qué pensaba y cómo amaba y odiaba. Osama Bin Laden, íntimo y personal. Abbottabad, Pakistán, una ciudad de 500.000 habitantes a los pies del Himalaya que disfruta de un clima de montaña con veranos frescos. Junio señala el inicio de la temporada veraniega. Pakistaníes acomodados de las calurosas regiones del sur disfrutan aquí de un agradable verano. Abbottabad es una ciudad segura. Al fin y al cabo, la Academia Militar del Ejército pakistaní está aquí. En este tipo de entorno abundan los colegios privados y los internados de calidad. Si se compara con el resto de Pakistán, en la ciudad reina una agradable calma. El barrio de Bilal Town no es uno de los más distinguidos. Sin embargo, en este entorno casi rural hay grandes propiedades aisladas. Ninguno de los residentes sospecha que en una de esas casas se oculta el hombre más buscado. Osama Bin Laden. En otro tiempo sembró el miedo y el terror en el mundo occidental. En su casa de Abbottabad, solo una televisión lo conecta al mundo exterior. A veces en las noticias se ve a sí mismo, el hombre al que muchos consideran el terrorista más peligroso del mundo. Para quienes lo buscan parece que ha desaparecido de la faz de la tierra. En su escondite ve una y otra vez cintas de vídeo que muestran lo que él considera su mayor triunfo. El ataque al World Trade Center el 11 de septiembre de 2001, en el que perecieron casi 3.000 personas. Aproximadamente 10 años después, Bin Laden quiere saborear su macabro triunfo una vez más. Desde su escondite escribe a uno de sus hombres de confianza.
Pronto será el 10º aniversario del bendito ataque contra Nueva York y Washington. Todos sois conscientes de que debemos aprovechar el aniversario en los medios. Tenemos mucho que mostrar. Si Al Jazeera se muestra receptiva, les decimos que estamos dispuestos a cooperar. Podemos sugerirles que hagan un documental sobre este aniversario y ofrecernos a proporcionarles material impreso, audio y vídeo. También deberíamos buscar un canal estadounidense que tienda a ser imparcial.
Según el gobierno estadounidense, que ha publicado 103 documentos en la red, son citas originales del propio Bin Laden. Material encontrado en Abbottabad en 2011, la mayoría en discos duros. Aunque Bin Laden se expresa con libertad en estos documentos, no sabemos qué impresión nos daría en un cara a cara. Pero el periodista británico Peter Bergen lo experimentó en primera persona.
Conocí a Bin Laden en 1997 en el este de Afganistán. Fue su primera entrevista para la televisión. Daba la impresión de ser un hombre serio, bien informado. Muy discreto. Yo no me lo esperaba. Pensaba que iba a dar puñetazos en la mesa y a gritar. Y no fue así, estaba muy tranquilo.
El 11 de septiembre de 2001, Osama Bin Laden humilla a la mayor potencia mundial, Estados Unidos. Osama está en una cueva en Afganistán. Rodeado de sus seguidores, lleva la cuenta de los aviones secuestrados que se estrellan contra sus objetivos uno tras otro. Ese día se convierte en el terrorista más famoso del mundo y en el más buscado. Pero no fue algo fortuito. Osama Bin Laden nace en 1957 en Arabia Saudí, un país marcado por antiguas tradiciones y que estaba viviendo una rápida transformación. El petróleo hace rica a la nación del desierto, pero el dinero trae consigo la modernidad. El consumo y la decadencia empiezan a convivir con la vida sencilla de los beduinos. Osama Bin Laden no se encuentra en el lado de los perdedores con este cambio que vive su país. Es uno de los 54 hijos de Mohammed Bin Laden, un constructor que se hizo tremendamente rico con el boom de la construcción en Arabia Saudí. La familia Bin Laden, muy bien conectada, continúa ganando prestigio e influencia.
Era un clan muy bien organizado. Y según la tradición islámica, Osama sabía, como hijo reconocido de Mohammed Bin Laden, que contaría con una fortuna bastante considerable al morir su padre.
Como muchos saudíes de su generación, al joven Osama le interesan las novedades. Los coches son su pasión. También le gusta jugar al fútbol. En Jeddah estudia en los colegios más elitistas del país. Su profesor de gimnasia en la escuela, Al-Tayer, procede de Siria. Allí pertenecía a la radical hermandad musulmana. Ahora vive exiliado en Arabia Saudí. Este profesor intenta deliberadamente influir en las ideas políticas del joven Osama.
Osama tuvo una formación muy especial, en un entorno elitista influido por la cultura europea, pero también fue educado por activistas sirios de la hermandad musulmana que veían el Islam como un motor de cambio político y no solo como una práctica religiosa.
Osama Bin Laden estudia Economía y Ciencias Empresariales en la Universidad Rey Abdulaziz en Jeddah, pero asiste a conferencias de estudiosos islámicos. Uno de ellos, Abdallah Yusuf Assam, llama a los fieles a la yihad, la guerra santa. Deben defender la tierra del Islam de los infieles, y eso solo se puede conseguir extendiendo la lucha armada a la totalidad del mundo islámico. Afganistán. Aquí los yihadistas luchan contra un invasor hostil. Las tropas de la Unión Soviética han ocupado el país. Muchos jóvenes saudíes acuden a la llamada de esta guerra santa por sus convicciones, pero también por sed de aventura. En 1984, Osama Bin Laden se convierte en uno de ellos, y su participación en la guerra lo hace famoso en su país. En 1990, Estados Unidos despliega sus tropas en Arabia Saudí. Su misión es liberar a la vecina Kuwait, invadida por el dictador iraquí Saddam Hussein. Para Bin Laden, la presencia de tropas norteamericanas en su patria es una afrenta al mundo musulmán. Los lugares santos del Islam, la Meca y Medina, están en Arabia Saudí. La retirada de los rusos pone fin a la aventura de Bin Laden en Afganistán. El militante fundamentalista busca una nueva esfera de actividad.
En aquel momento, llega incluso a ofrecer al ministro de Defensa un ejército de voluntarios para combatir a los iraquíes. Pero cuando el ministro y el rey desprecian su ofrecimiento, Osama Bin Laden opta por pasarse a la oposición. A partir de entonces parece que empieza a pensar en emprender acciones, incluso violentas.